as to whether it really is viable or not. Okay. First thing I'd like to point out is that the default analysis without the 6-year cycle has found this to be the 4.5-year cycle, and even when I add the 6-year cycle, again the 4.5-year cycle trough is found to be in the 4th of October. So in fact there is no difference whether we include the 6-year cycle or whether we don't. What is the difference with including that 6-year cycle or not? Well, the difference has to do with, again, the shapes of the cycles. Okay, and let me zoom out and show you what I mean. All right, let's work backwards. Let's start with the 6-year cycle. Oh, I need to turn this board on. There we go. Okay, so if there is a 6-year cycle active in the markets, then let's have a look at the shapes of the 18-month cycles. Okay, this 18-month cycle, again, I'm going to draw it above price, went up to a late peak, came down to a higher trough. That's a positive underlying trend. What was happening? Well, the 4.5-year cycle was flat. Okay, neutral. The 6-year cycle was going up. So that is a correct cycle shape, if you like, for the underlying trend. What should have happened in the next 18-month cycle? Well, let's assume for now that the next 18-month cycle is complete, and you will see if I draw the cycle shape above the price moved up to a peak roughly in the middle, perhaps slightly after the middle of the cycle, and then came down to an only slightly higher trough. You see there? That trough compared to that trough. Okay, this one here is only slightly higher. Okay, so it's possibly a slightly positive underlying trend, but it is more accurately probably a neutral underlying trend. Let's see what was happening to the longer cycles during that time. Well, the 4.5-year cycle was going down. Okay, negative in other words, and the 6-year cycle was still going up. So we have a negative and a positive, which together join to form a neutral underlying trend. So the cycle shape that occurred in this 18-month cycle is consistent with the fact that a 6-year cycle is active in the markets. So there's no inconsistency there. Of course, I don't need to talk through the whole thing with the default analysis because you know the argument by now. Let me just turn on the semicircles. But if we only consider the 4.5-year cycle here, then of course we would have been saying, but the 4.5-year cycle is coming down into this trough. So why didn't this 18-month cycle have a negative shape? It should have had a negative shape like that. Okay, so the 6-year cycle helps to resolve the fact that that was not a negatively shaped 18-month cycle. Okay, so that's the first thing that I consider when I'm asking myself, was the 4th of October trough a trough of the 4.5-year cycle? Okay, that's the first thing. If there is a 6-year cycle, I mean, many people, when they look at this, the reason I'm doing this, I'm sorry if I'm jumping around a bit, but the reason I'm explaining this is many people would look at the price action recently from May 2011 until October 2011, and they would say that's not really a very big move down, and the trough that has formed since then is not really very prominent. And it feels somehow as if the 4.5-year cycle should be more prominent. There's one of the big myths of Hurst cyclic theory, blown out of the water right there. One of the things you've got to be very careful of when we talk about it in the workshops is when there's a trough of the 4.5-year cycle, that does not mean the markets are going to go up for 2.25 years afterwards. Okay, cycle troughs are often much less significant than one feels they should be, because of the magnitude of the trough. It's an inherent feature of Hurst cyclic analysis, and it's part of the real thrill of mastering Hurst cyclic analysis. Is understanding that and being able to identify a trough as 4.5 years. Now, so I'm saying that the trough of 4th of October could very well have been a trough of the 4.5-year cycle. The sort of magnitude of it, what a sentient trader calls the bounce, which is the move out of that trough, so far, it's been fairly impressive, and I know some Cent Trader users. I know one Cent Trader user in particular who has profited greatly from the bounce out of the early October trough, on the basis that it would be a trough of a prominent cycle. But many people are still standing in the sidelines, and they're saying that's not big enough to be 4.5 years. Well, I'd like to point out the previous 4.5 year cycle trough, according to this analysis, which of course was in August of 2007. Here it is here, and I'll draw an arrow below it, parallel to price, and I'll show you that in fact the bounce that we've had so far pretty much correlates very closely with the bounce that happened after the August 2007 4.5 year trough. So by no means is price action showing this to be a weaker trough, or a trough that doesn't have the magnitude of 4.5 years. It absolutely could have a 4.5 year magnitude. And in fact, let's take a look very quickly at a really interesting comparison. Let's measure the time since the October trough, and you can see there, if I count the bars, that's 105 bars. Okay, 105 bars, or 15 weeks have passed since that October trough. All right, so let me zoom in on it. Okay, that's what it looks like. Sort of capture that image in your mind, if you like. Okay, that's how price has moved out of this trough. And now let's go back to. I'm keeping the same price scale by just shifting back in the chart, and let's go back to where are we? August of 2007. Okay, there we go. There it is, and let me drag it across. Okay, so that's the move that followed, and let's just zoom out a little bit. That's the move that followed. Now, what did I say? It was 105 bars, and so 105 bars after that August trough positioned us over here. Okay, so what happened in August 2007 is the market, of course, kept moving up. Am I in the right year? Let me. No, I'm in 2006. No wonder, I thought it didn't look right. So let me move forward again. Move forward a year. And let me just do it in a much easier way by doing that. There we go. Okay. Now, there's that 4.5 year cycle trough. 105 days after that 4.5 year cycle trough places us in early December 2007. And so you can see what was happening with the market. It had already, in fact, formed its peak over there. And if we zoom out and slide left a little bit in the chart, you can see what happened. The market, of course, kept falling, and the resistance kept falling all the way down to the March 2009 trough. Okay, so that's an interesting comparison, I think, to look at what's happening now and compare it to what happened in August of 2007. Right. So far, my discussion about the potential 4.5 year cycle trough in early October of 2011 has been very vague. I've been talking about cycle shapes and underlying trend, and the bounce out of it not disproving it. Okay, so let's be a little more specific. How do we be specific about the formation of a trough? And of course, the way in which we do that is we look at price crossing the cyclic tools, FLDs and VTLs. So let's take a look at. Okay, before I make this look like the kitchen sink. Right, there we go. Let's first of all take a look at the 18-month FLD. Okay, and of course, when considering FLDs, we should always be looking at a median chart, line on median chart, because it's when the median price crosses the FLD that things get interesting. Okay, price has not crossed the 18-month FLD, as you can see. Price is still below the 18-month FLD. Does that mean that the 18-month trough has not occurred? No, not at all. All it means is that we haven't yet received confirmation that this was a trough of the 18-month cycle. Okay, that's very important. Let's see to what level the confirmation has occurred. Let's look at one cycle shorter, the 40-week cycle. All right, as you can see, price crossed the 40-week cycle FLD on the, what was that, the 30th of November 2011. Okay, what does that mean? When median price crosses the FLD in that way, that confirms that the trough that preceded the price cross was of at least 40-week magnitude. Okay, so that's very important. So we know that the trough that occurred on the 4th of October was of at least 40-week magnitude. It might possibly have been of 18-month or 54-month magnitude, depending on your particular analysis. Now, we can look at the shorter and shorter cycles, but there's no point because I think I've made the point in terms of the 40-week FLD. Let's take a look at some VTLs, because VTLs are also very useful for confirming the positions of troughs. Now, can we get any interesting, useful information from the VTLs I've plotted on the chart? Well, not really. The only useful piece of information that we've got here is that price crossed the 80-day VTL, which confirms the position of a 20-week trough, of course. You'll know that the VTLs give us information about the cycle 1 degree longer. And so this was of at least 20-week magnitude. There is a 20-week VTL there, but as you can see, it hasn't yet been crossed, and it is also an outdated VTL, so it's of no particular interest to us here at this kind of scale. Okay, so if we look purely at the evidence, the facts, the raw facts, then we can say that the trough that occurred on the 4th of October had at least 40-week magnitude, but it might be of 4.5-year magnitude. Now let's do something else. Let's explore the options. How do you explore the options? Well, if I use the right menu, we can go and have a look at another option. And here I'm going to present you with a different analysis. Mark, what makes that VTL outdated? Okay, that's a good question. A VTL, of course, is a valid trend line which obeys Hurst's rules. And a VTL joins 2 consecutive troughs or 2 consecutive peaks. Okay? Now, it is not always possible